we're going to try for Brad Gagnon, national NFL writer for Bleacher Report on the crazy weekend that was.
Hello.
I'm looking for Brad Gagnon.
Yeah, this is Brad. How's it going, man?
Hey, it's Mike Richards calling. Thanks for joining us here this morning on rawmikeRichards.com.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And did you like the way I said your last name? Because I believe there'd be some people might be choking on that second G. That's just a guess.
Yeah, well, believe me, as an NFL guy, it's the further south I get. I mean, if I'm on with someone in Florida, there's pretty much no hope.
we were laughing at your Twitter account, Brad,
awesome.
because you pinned it, and you could check him out, Brad_Gagnon, and it was so funny listening to the pronunciation of it, because me and Mike, we know a couple Gagnons, actually Steph, who actually worked with me and you, Brad, at the Score. I don't know if you remember Steph, but
right.
he was in the IT department. Same last name, but man, we got a pretty good chuckle out of it. Thanks for joining us today.
Well, Brad, I got to think there's probably some Gagnons maybe down in Louisiana there that were not pleased with what they saw yesterday. That, for me, in terms of shocking endings, is probably right up there with the Music City Miracle. I guess it's now being called, the Minneapolis Miracle. It certainly was something that was so unexpected, but the way that it unfolded and the way that, we took a look at the bad tackling, the all those things that had to happen, it truly was a miracle. And if anyone's choking on something, it was me yesterday. That really was, in some ways, fantastic. It was fantastic.
Well, yeah, that's the beauty in these momentous sort of unforgettable plays. The last time we had something that sort of felt similar was the Malcolm Butler interception to finish the Super Bowl against Seattle 3 years ago, where that wasn't as improbable, but just the fact that a game swayed so dramatically on one final play, and at that point in time we could pick that thing apart for hours, for days. There were so many different variables, and that's something we did last night already, because there's, again, it's as simple as saying, he completed 161-yard pass to win the game, and then you look at how he completed that pass and how Marcus Williams dodged the tackle more so than missed it. I mean, it was one of the most inexplicable defensive plays you're ever going to see from an individual defender. And then you can go even broader, and you can go, first of all, why was Marcus Williams the only guy deep on that side of the field when it was essentially a Hail Mary situation? Why did the Saints even have linebackers drifting in the middle of the field? Why did they have a four-man rush? Maybe it should have been more about defending the 40-45-yard line to make sure that this didn't get deep on you, considering it was their last play. So, that's the big question. And even just the fact that the Vikings had their shot. I mean, we got to remember that there was a 3rd and 1 for the Saints on the previous drive before their field goal, where they essentially, declined the opportunity to pick up the first down so that they could center the ball with Alvin Kamara, who essentially ran to his left to get the ball into the middle of the field for the field goal. Instead of doing that, maybe they convert that first down. They bring the clock down to 1 second and kick the field goal with no time left. So you can just analyze forever, which is so fun. Analyze forever all of the little variables that were required just for this play to happen, which is what makes it, of course, such a once-in-a-lifetime moment.
Now, when we look at Case Keenum, and I know people have talked in sort of almost disparagingly about him most of the season, and I'm not one of these guys that likes to see failure. I like when guys are able to sort of climb to the top, and I certainly saw him play when he was a Houston Cougar. But the athleticism in the mind was there, but sometimes it's a little kismet for me when it comes to the NFL, because the timing of the quarterback, and for that position, you have to be someone that the coaching works, schematically it works, the offensive line, what you like to do compared to what the organization does. There's so many factors that go in to making something work, which means you don't have to be a Hall of Fame quarterback necessarily, but there's certain elements that you have to have. And so I'm just curious, Brad, going forward, regardless of what happens, the situation in Minnesota next year will be what?
It's still a great question, because for whatever reason, Mike Zimmer has continued to sort of avoid praising Case Keenum to too much of an extent, and that's maybe just because this is a business. But the reality is, they make Teddy Bridgewater, their number 3 quarterback, when all 3 of those guys, Sam Bradford and the other 2, were healthy for yesterday's game. Bradford, you can't imagine would be coming back. So maybe by default at this point, it looks as though they're ready to move on from Bradford and Bridgewater and make Keenum their guy regardless of what happens against Philadelphia in the conference championship game. I mean, the very fact that he got them to the division playoffs and he made some huge third down plays and was able to really come up big when it mattered in a playoff game against a team like the Saints, against a quarterback like Drew Brees. I mean, that's an opportunistic defense. That's a good pass rush. We saw them all over him in the second half of this game. So, that alone is, I think he's now passed the test. And I think that's enough for, if the Vikings essentially are deciding between those 3, which one is worth paying and which one is worth keeping around to be the potential franchise quarterback for years to come, it's probably Keenum, and I think he probably clinched it yesterday.
Okay, let me throw a little bit of a wrinkle into this. If Pat Shurmur moves on to take a head coaching position, does that reflect at all with the Vikings quarterback decision, considering that Shurmur seems to be the Keenum whisperer, and maybe they think that's the reason why Keenan is doing as well as he is, and if Shurmur isn't there, do they still have that same success?
Yeah, that's a good point. And if Shurmur ends up, even in a place like New York, and the Giants decide to finally move on from Eli Manning, you could end up seeing Case Keenum follow Shurmur, which would be kind of an interesting situation. Something like that. Yeah, that would definitely throw a wrinkle into things. But again, I do think ultimately Rick Spielman's going to look at the situation. And first of all, I can't see Sam Bradford being the starting quarterback for the Vikings next season. It just doesn't seem like, I don't know what the investment would be at this point in time. Teddy Bridgewater, again, becoming the number 3 quarterback this week when they were all healthy for the first time. That's not a good sign, but that's not Spielman making those calls. So, the dynamics change completely if you lose your offensive coordinator. It's still going to be the same coaching staff probably aside from that. You end up with your quarterback's coach potentially having a chance to become the offensive coordinator. You could consider him to be a whisperer just as much potentially. So I would still bet on Keenum being the guy, but that whole dynamic definitely makes things a little more complicated. It makes for what's going to be one of the most fun storylines of the off season, because I don't think I can think of a time where we've ever had 3 quarterbacks on one roster all hitting free agency and all essentially being considered probably, I guess if you took the top 32 quarterbacks in football at this very moment, I think you would maybe put all 3 of them in there.
We're in conversation with Brad Gagnon from Bleacher Report. He's the National Football League writer here on rawmikerichards.com, watching on the website, and, of course, the dedicated YouTube channel live. You should also know, Brad, you're talking to a host right now that took the under in the Pittsburgh-Jacksonville game. because I figured with frozen people, the Florida team, good defenses, how could they possibly score a game between Tulsa and SMU, where the total was probably 78.5, and they scorched that too. Unbelievable game, and I just have to think that in how it unfolded, which was to me very, very strange. I'm looking at some of the play calling necessarily towards the end for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I'm looking at their coordinators and wondering, do you see people moving on or changing because of that game? Now, it's not solely because of one game, but I think maybe even the body of work. Did the Rooney family take a look at really what happened on the sidelines yesterday?
Yeah, to get 42 points out of your offense and lose to a team like the Jaguars, to lose to Blake Bortles, that's an indictment on a defense that isn't what it was when the Steelers were at their best, when they were winning Super Bowls, essentially now a decade ago. In their defense, Ryan Shazier was their best player, or is their best player, and obviously isn't available. But they gave up too many big plays all season long. They couldn't get the Jaguars off the field in big moments in this game. Blake Bortles looked not only respectable, he looked like, a really solid quarterback, which says a lot considering how he looked against the Buffalo Bills 1 week prior. So, yeah, that's a concern. I think this that defense has lacked identity for years, and you wonder if maybe a change in the coaching staff is in order. And then on the other side of the ball, everyone's, Todd Haley would be the GOAT of the weekend if not for Marcus Williams, and and you look at some of that play calling, that 4th and 1 play action throw to Juju Smith. You're throwing to a rookie 15 yards downfield on 4th and 1 when your quarterback is like 9 feet tall and 400 pounds. And like that's an easy sneak, right? Or at the very least, you're giving it to maybe the best running back in football in Le'Veon Bell, who only had 16 carries all day, despite the fact that he was always supposed to be the key to this game against a defense that's great against the pass and not very good against the run. So not a lot made sense with Todd Haley in this game, and he's been taking more and more heat over the course of the year slowly to begin with. So, yeah, you do wonder if they're maybe running out of patience. I mean, it's quietly been a decade now, 2008 to now, since the Steelers last won a championship, and they sort of come up short pretty much every January in similar fashion, it feels like. So yeah, I think Mike Tomlin is probably safe for at least another year, but Keith Butler and Todd Haley absolutely could potentially be axed in the next coming days, and it wouldn't shock me.
No, it wouldn't shock me at all. Speaking of that, somewhat breaking news, and we won't discuss it, Brad, but I just wanted to throw it out there to our audience. The Tennessee Titans and head coach Mike Mularkey have mutually agreed to part ways. That's according to league sources. So Mularkey's on the move out as Titans head coach. Not a surprise there, considering the relationship between him and his quarterback. Probably not as good as it should be. Let's go back to Jacksonville for a second. Blake Bortles was very air-free, and that's kind of what Blake Bortles has to be. When he goes into New England next weekend, can Blake Bortles keep this game close? It's around a 9 to 10 point spread, depending on where you're buying that ticket from. Can Bortles and Jacksonville compete at that level with the New England Patriots?
Yeah, I think they can. It's easy to look at what they did against Pittsburgh and then buy in now. And it wouldn't shock anyone, and certainly not me, if the Patriots won this game by 33 points and Bortles threw 3 picks. But, you look at what they did against Pittsburgh and what the formula would be against New England. And they have, right? I mean, first of all, they have Tom Coughlin, which is probably the first thing you need to beat the Patriots in a big playoff game. But, Leonard Fournette is a guy who can grind away and shorten a game, which is really the key when you're on the road as an underdog in the playoffs. It's just keep their offense off the play as much as possible, control the clock as much as you possibly can, win the time of possession battle, which they actually did lose by a short margin yesterday, but generally is a key to winning on the road in the playoffs. So first of all, that's the first thing. Bortles has the support of Leonard Fournette on the offensive side of the ball. They could potentially churn it away, and there's an opportunity to really control the Patriots that way. If you're just relying on Bortles simply against the Bill Belichick coach defense, you're in trouble. And then the other thing is that he's got that defensive support. He's got they've got the exact formula you want to beat Tom Brady on the defensive side of the ball, maybe more so than the Pittsburgh Steelers, where they can get that constant pressure up the middle in Brady's face, which is a big reason why he lost those 2 Super Bowls to the Giants, why he lost to the Denver Broncos in those 2 playoff games in a 3-year span. That's the key with this guy. We know that now. We've seen 18 years of it, is getting constant pressure on Brady up the middle. And the Jaguars can do that, and they have 2 Pro Bowl caliber cornerbacks who are good enough to hold the receiving core, which is missing Julian Edelman, back for just long enough to potentially get to Brady and get in his face and get to him early and pull this off. Now, still, it's in New England. It's Bill Belichick. It's Tom Brady. It's a very inexperienced Jags team, and Blake Bortles is the ultimate wild card in that he could screw it up for them no matter what everybody else does. But I absolutely think they have I don't think they're winning this game, but I think it could be competitive at the very least.
Well, we're degenerates, so we just basically, was it plus 9.5? Is it?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm already on the. I'm already on the Jags
I
plus
wouldn't
the
be shocked
9.5.
if it's. I wouldn't be shocked if the Pats go out and win as 24-17, 24-20. I mean, it wouldn't be surprising at all if they kept it close. If the Jags kept it close throughout.
Brad, are the Minnesota Vikings going to host a Super Bowl in their own building?
It's looking good. I mean, I think that, they're the favorite on the road. That was a mistake with Atlanta, but I think that the Vikings are, they're obviously better on the defensive side of the ball. They've got some sort of good karma going right now, maybe making up for the years of playoff failures and disappointments and last second missed kicks and all that. So it certainly feels like there's some whether you talk about being generous. I don't think you want to bet based on destiny, but I mean there's a feel with this team right now that it's like, are they going to lose to Nick Foles and the Eagles, and really the Falcons beat themselves as much as the Eagles beat the Falcons on Saturday. So I just think that they're a much better team with a much better. I mean, that defense is unreal. I mean, just watching them in the first half against the Saints, and eventually Drew Brees started getting his opportunities, and they got back into the game. That was partly on the Keenum interception and a few other plays that didn't break Minnesota's way. That didn't have much to do with their key players on the defensive side of the ball. But I mean, those guys are as best as any, or better than any unit, I think, in the NFL. And I think Nick Foles is going to have some huge problems against them. The only other factor that is kind of working in Philly's favor is obviously just the fact that the game is outdoors in Philadelphia. Case Keenum, not much of a track record in outdoor cold weather games, so you wonder if he's just not quite as crisp as he was in big situations against Philly and that Eagles defense, which is also pretty opportunistic and pretty talented. Maybe makes a play against an inexperienced quarterback, kind of like the one that Marcus Williams made with his interception in the fourth quarter before his name was marred forever. And that changes the game for Philly. So I think it's also going to be a close game, but I'm leaning Minnesota.
Yeah, no, I agree. Hey, Brad, great job here today with us. I can't believe you haven't been on one of my shows before. This is the first time we've talked. Is it not?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I'm trying to think back in some of your other gigs we may have, but it hasn't happened of late. So anytime you want to have me on, give me a shout.
Well, you did a fantastic job. I'm a fan. By the way, whereabouts are you from? Where are you from?
I'm Toronto, born and raised. Dave and I went to or worked at the Score together when I was probably still a teenager at that point in time, and went up through the Score.com ranks, and then Bleacher Report for some reason saw something in me. So here I am. But I'm still born. I'm still in Toronto right now.
Wow, that's a great job. Hey, thanks so much for joining us, and for sure, I'd love to talk to you again sometime.
Thanks a lot, guys. Have a good one.
Thanks, Brad.
Thanks, Brad.
That is Brad Gagnon from Bleacher Report.
What? Did we just become best friends? Yep.